Welcome to the pod.
All right, guys, welcome to another amazing episode of Two Chassids in a Pod. We have a very, very special guest. I'm Eliyahu. I'm here with Avidan, and we have with us all the way from Manhattan, Rabbi Mark Wildes joining us. His son is a known Tzfadi, even though he travels the whole entire world. But we consider him, we take credit for his Tzfadiness that he spreads his vibes. But now we're going to get a different exposure into the father that started it all. So welcome, everybody, and hello to Rabbi Mark.
Hello to you guys. What an honor and a pleasure.
Nice to meet you.
It took a while to get this podcast going, but here we are finally, so we might as well take advantage. We're in very interesting times, right? Elul is upon us. We're in the middle of it, right? And the energies are getting higher and higher. And this episode really is a special one because not only we want to get into everything you're doing with the Manhattan Jewish experience, right, and everything that's going on there in New York, and I have some very really just curious questions about what's going on there with our brothers and sisters. But why don't we jump in actually to begin with the current project that you're working on, this 40-day challenge? It's making its rounds online, and we've seen it. Different things going on. You have your book as well. Just tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll go in, backwards into your story.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you, L'chaim, to you. L'chaim. It's really a pleasure, guys, to be here, and big fan of your podcast and everything you guys are doing. And I started MGE 23 years ago to reach out to our less affiliated Jewish brothers and sisters. You guys know New York City is just like, it's home to so many Jews that are just not to any fault of their own, pretty much disconnected from Torah. And the high holiday season is I don't know how it became this way. I don't know who decided that Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur should be the 2 times a year most American Jews come to services. I don't know whose decision that was. Probably not the best marketing decision, I'll be honest, because I would have picked probably Simchas Torah, the next week, if you want to get people back, actually give them a little joy. But so I wrote this book called The 40-Day Challenge to give people some preparation, because everyone just walks into Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur sort of waiting for the magic to happen. And then they walk out like, oh, that was very pleasant. It was very nice. But I don't know, I'm kind of the same person I was before I came in. I'm not really so changed or moved or inspired. And there's a great line that I put in the introduction from Rav Soloveitchik, is that there can be no holiness without preparation, right? That ein kedusha b'li hachana. The idea that
says about the Chassidim, right? The original Chassidim, they would prepare an hour, pray for an hour, come down from their prayer for an hour.
Yeah. I mean, that's why Chassidim know how to daven, because they prepare. And it's us Litvaks are still struggling with the whole davening thing, because we just kind of jump into it. We do our thing, we get out, and it's a mistake. And it's a mistake to do that for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. So I wrote this book to give 40 little tidbits that could be read every day. They're just like sort of bite-sized, digestible ideas that you can read in a 5-minute span, and then just hopefully it builds. You know what I mean? Malin b'kodesh, that we go up in sanctity. We get to Rosh Hashanah, and finally, by the time Yom Kippur hits, we're in a different place because we've done some prep work. That's basically the idea behind it.
It's amazing, goal-oriented. Now's the time. One of the things we learned, we have a chabura here every week in Tzfat, and one of the things we learned last night is the importance of the internal side of tshuva, which is returning your heart to Hashem. But really, the only way to prove that your heart desires to be close to Hashem is by actions. Actions are not really the end-all be-all, right? They're just a proof to the most inner desires. So it's not about necessarily fixing your actions all the time. You really need to live with Hashem, but your actions are the only way to prove how much you really want something. Right? It's the only way to prove it. But and also funny, on the other hand, it's so much to do. So you have to break it down to this 40 steps.
Yeah, but it's actually, that was my entry today. Today's day 5 and the challenge. And I quoted the famous line from the Sefer HaChinuch, which was of unknown authorship.
It's a Tzfat.
Yeah. Do they believe he was from Tzfat, the Sefer HaChinuch?
I think it's right. Azkari, no?
So they don't know. The scholars don't really know who wrote this book, but it was written during medieval times. But he's got a famous line, "Acharei hapulot nimshechu halevavot." After one's actions, follow one's heart. And that's why Judaism is so mitzvah-centered, that what we do, the Baal Shem Tov famously said that you are where your thoughts are. And that's true. But how do you get your thoughts to be in a certain kind of place? How do you get your emotions, your feelings to be more connected to a higher plane? And the way we do that in Torah is through mitzvos, is through the actions. And, the Baal HaTanya famously taught that, every mitzvah pertains in some way to either to your thoughts, your speech, or your what you do. That's the way we operate as human beings. And so that's why Judaism is so mitzvah-centric. It's all about performing certain activities. I hate calling them rituals because they sound so rituals. But if you engage in certain activities, those activities can then have an impact on the way you think, on the way you feel. And, you could tell people, be kind, and you can philosophize till you're blue in the face about kindness. But if you don't actually start doing acts of chesed, performing acts of kindness, of loving kindness for other people, you're not going to grow from chesed. You're just not going to, you're going to be the same person. You'll know about it, but you won't be it. So that's actually, it's funny because you just talked about actions. And, I'll tell you something. I used to be very skeptical about Chabad guys on the street putting tefillin on like stop, I don't know. I guess I don't look so Jewish and you can't see my yarmulke sometimes. And I still get stopped. Hey, did you put on tefillin? I'm like, yeah, actually I'm a rabbi. I try to get other people to put on tefillin. And so I used to be like, what are you doing? Like, what do you mean? I'm trying to get Jews to put on tefillin. It's the most incredible thing in the world. And now I have to tell you, in my old age now, I start realizing the profundity because I learned the Tanya and I've been teaching it for the last 2 years. And the Tanya really teaches that these mitzvos really sort of open up. They really reveal, these mitzvos really reveal, different aspects of God's light. Even if the person who's doing the mitzvah doesn't fully understand what he or she is doing, they're still bringing God's presence into the world and into their own lives and impacting their own souls. But I didn't really get that until I started doing more Tanya learning.
Yeah, talking about Tanya, I read something very interesting a few days ago in a daily Tanya. I don't know if it was already a week ago. I was talking about this concept about tzedakah and about learning Torah and about the whole purpose of the world, and how back in the day, back in the times of our sages, the number one thing to do was learning Torah. This was the best thing you could do is learning Torah. This is the most important thing. But actually now, saying in Tanya, it was already in the Alter Rebbe's time, already 200 years ago. He's saying how actually now it's tzedakah that is the most important thing to do now is literally acts of kindness. We're such a stage of just action is the most important thing at this stage. And I just found it very interesting.
Different times, you mean? Different times reflect different aspects of Torah, of Jewish life.
Yeah, it's very interesting how we move into these different stages, and now it's about this more. And we're very close, and it's actually easy. Learning Torah. I mean, you could debate what's harder. It's a good question. It's a good question. Depends who.
Well, it also depends who you are. For some people, sitting and learning, it comes very natural.
That's
For
true.
others, I just got back from the airport. You guys know my oldest son, Yosef. I just took my youngest son, Yehuda, to go. He's going for Shana Bet for another year of learning in yeshiva in Israel. And the lines were it's unbelievable. We stood there for 2.5 hours on this line just to make sure he got in. And look, there are literally dozens of flights going to Israel now, right? This period of time, filling up all the seminaries, girls, guys, 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds. It's unbelievable. I mean, I don't know how many. I posted it on my Instagram feed. I just look at these lines. It's like people waiting online to go to Israel to learn. It's unbelievable. We kind of take it for granted, but we live in very special times.
Really a blessing to see it, and the advances of technology and travel. It makes it so much easier. It's never been easier for a Jew to come to Israel, right? It's never been easier for it to be able to be here, to live here, and especially to get here. I mean, you're in New York, within 12 hours you could be here. It's
totally. It's no more excuses.
Literally a year ago, it was the hardest time to come to Israel.
Yeah. You know what? I guess, it's funny that, Avidan, that you're saying that, because it's like we got so used to it being easy, and then it became such a hassle to go there. MG had 2 trips canceled. Last summer, 2021, and the summer before, 2020. And that's why we brought over 50 people this year, because we had people waiting to come with us. And, you really appreciate it when it's kept from you.
So what is Manhattan Jewish experience? What do you have going on there in New York? And, obviously, if you could maybe just introduce a little bit of the background of what is the current state. I know New York has a ton of Jews leaving. I'm guessing that those are not exactly your crowd, right? There's probably the more conservative families that are already established that are picking up and leaving, right? But what is going on with young Jews our age, in their 20s and their 30s in New York right now? And what is Manhattan Jewish experience doing within that realm of
so there's a lot. I would probably say there's 3 groups. There's the very large singles observant religious Jewish community in their 20s and 30s. A lot of them live in the city. If you guys have ever spent a Shabbat on the Upper West Side, have you guys ever done that?
No, thank God. I was single in Jerusalem.
You were single in Yerushalayim. Okay. So I was single. I've been in this neighborhood for a long time. I'm married 26 years, Bli Ayin Hara, and I was single on the West Side for 5 years. So that just gives you a sense of how long I've been living here. Okay. And I raised 4 kids in the city. So there's a very large, growing, vibrant, religious singles community in Manhattan. It's got a lot of powerful, wonderful things to it. And it's got some dysfunction to it as well. It's got some problems. Then you have a very large, unaffiliated or less affiliated singles population living all over Manhattan. West Side, East Side, Downtown, Village, East Village, West Village. And that's the group that I started MGE basically to try to engage. Because it was killing me that there's so much vibrancy in the other group and very little Jewish vibrancy and very little in the other group. There's some exceptions here and there, but basically it's the yeshiva day school kids who are living, Shomer Shabbat, Sabbath observant, living in the city, filling up the large modern Orthodox synagogues, the Jewish Center, Ohev Tzedek, Young Israel, if any of you listeners have heard those shuls. And then you have a much larger group of 20s and 30s who are off the grid. They're in the city. They come here after college. Some of them went to college here. Maybe a lot of them went to Columbia or NYU. And they're in the city, or they went to Harvard, Yale, or Boston University, or University of Michigan, or Wisconsin, and they come to New York, and New York is this hub, and that's why I started it here. I started here because I wanted to make as big of an impact with as young of a population as possible, and it's a great age, I have to tell you. I think it's easier in a sense because there are a lot of other outreach groups on college campus. I don't do college. Now, God bless my...
It's not mature enough.
It depends. Chabad does amazing work on a million college campuses. Meor does amazing work on college campuses. They do great work. It all depends. I think it's a little more challenging. One of my teachers, Rabbi Mark Wildes, said, I prefer to wait till they sobered up. They finish college and sobered up, move to New York City, get a job, start living like a normal human being. It's a little easier to teach such a person Torah.
Rent, taxes.
Yeah, paying taxes. No, but Right,
This is when you need God.
Well, they don't have a mortgage yet. They don't have a mortgage, and they don't have a lot of expenses. But hey, living in New York City, man, it ain't cheap. But it's not just New York City. We have people coming from Queens, from New Jersey, from Connecticut, the surrounding areas. Manhattan's very expensive to live in. So I have a lot of students coming in from Hoboken, from Jersey City, from Astoria, Queens. I'm from Queens originally, so I kind of know those neighborhoods. So MJE started out to try to bring that crowd in to be able to experience some of the beauty of Jewish life in New York and really the beauty and the profundity of Torah. And we, thank God, had a wonderful, wonderful response. We do big Shabbos dinners. We have 3 locations, by the way, in Manhattan. I picked 3 spots where lots of 20s and 30s live: West Side, East Side, downtown. I've got rabbis in each. We have 18 people on staff right now, 9 full-time, 9 part-time.
Rabbi Daniel Boritz, millennial rabbi, join the works there.
He is speaking this Shabbos. Little plug. He's speaking Friday night and Shabbos morning. Very talented guy. My son Yosef, who you guys know, just did a beautiful musical meditation with him. There's just tremendous opportunities that New York has. I'm very proud, by the way. A lot of our graduates, some of whom become Balei Tshuva, some not, have made Aliyah. We have over 35 graduates who've made Aliyah. We have 344 couples that have met and married.
What does it mean to graduate? Not to turn that down, just that's amazing statistics, first of all. But what does that mean to graduate from MJE?
Well, people who, there's 2 types of graduates. One graduate is they've kind of grown out of our educational programming. We do a beginner's minyan on Shabbos. We do basic Judaism classes, Hebrew classes, and they're done with that. They've become more observant, more knowledgeable, more learned. They get to mainstream. The other type of graduate is someone who just simply moves out of the city. Mm-hmm. They just don't want to live in Manhattan anymore. Either it's too expensive or they had enough.
Still alumni.
They're still alumni. We got them on the WhatsApp group. We got and I keep in touch, and so we have a lot of, I'm doing this 23 years. So, and I would say there's like a new chevra that cycles in and out, I would say every 3 or 4 years, because people don't stay here forever. And that's kind of like the cycle of a lot of people's spiritual religious growth. So thank God a lot of them have met and married, moved to the burbs, some to Eretz Yisrael, which obviously is a huge something we're incredibly proud of.
For sure.
And
very amazing.
Yeah, and it's been great, and everybody's different. Some people love the social stuff, so they'll come to the Shabbos dinners. We have cocktails on the roof. We do retreats. We have a ski retreat to Vermont. We have a spring retreat in the Berkshires. And other people just are more intellectually oriented. They want to come to the shiurim, to the classes. Some more, they'll come to a musical meditation that my son does, or a class, a discussion on Kabbalah that Daniel is now leading for us. Everybody's different. You got to kind of have a wide net, throw out as much differing kinds of portals into the community, into Yiddishkeit, so that you can really sort of maximize who will come and who will grow.
What are your challenges right now when it comes to engagement or whatever it is, or retention?
I would say attention is number one. We've lost some attention.
Do you see a difference in that in generations when you see these cycles?
Oh, yeah. There's no question. I used to be able to teach a class for an hour, easy. I can get away with it once in a while, but all of our classes have been reduced to 40 minutes now, from an hour to 40 minutes in the last 20 years. That's number one difference. Number two difference, I would say, it used to be when I started out 25, 30 years ago, people believed there was a right and wrong. And you just had to kind of make a case that Judaism and the Torah was God's, prescription for morality in the world, right and wrong. And that's when Eshet Torah was very big on discovery and trying to demonstrate that the Torah comes from God. And how do we know that Mammon Har Sinai was, from Hashem, that event actually took place? And there are still people still interested in that. I'm actually writing a book, and I'm including in that I'm including like the famous Kuzari argument, the argument from mass revelation to explain things rationally. But today, a lot of my students are coming off college campus and they no longer subscribe to the belief in objective morality. They don't necessarily, yeah, it's hard. I'll be honest, I think they've been brainwashed, some of them. Not everyone. A lot of people are still open mind, and they hear that's one perspective. Let me hear what the rabbi's perspective is. There are people with open minds and not so open that their brain fell out, you know. But a lot of people have been a little brainwashed, in my opinion, on college campus that there really is no right or wrong. It's just your opinion versus my opinion. And everybody's correct and everybody's truthful. And there's no true religion. There's no true anything. Everything is subjective and everything is relative. And that is very difficult to deal with. So I will tell you what the best solution to that has been. And that's Kabbalah and Chassidus. And I'm not just saying this because I'm on your podcast.
It's a plug for us.
Because it is a little, because it's the classical medieval Jewish philosophy that I've been trained in. Rambam, Kreskis, Albo, Ramban to a certain degree, although Ramban wore both hats. Very good, right. Very intellectual, very heady. And it definitely resonates with some people. And I still include it in my classes. I think only to go the Kabbalah and Chassidus route, in my opinion, is not the way to go, unless that's your hashkafa, you know. I think you got to present both. For sure. But I don't want. But I think it's. Oh yeah, yeah, because you don't want to put all of your eggs in one basket, and you don't want to, because when you have 20 people sitting in a classroom, 10 people are more rationally oriented, 10 people are more spiritually oriented. 10 people are going to eat up the Balatanya, and the other 10 people are rolling their eyes, like, what is this stuff? And then there's the other group that really wants a rational basis. Rabbi, explain what this is about that makes sense in logical Western rational terms. So I'm a big advocate of trying to share, and when I teach a class,
for me to come to Hasidus, I had to first rationally understand it. That was for me like a hard icebreaker.
Well, I'm a big fan of Chabad Chassidus, not just because of the outreach and the Rebbe, but because it's to me it's a very well organized and laid out philosophy. A lot of people kind of associate Chabad with just go with your flow, and it's not true. The more you learn the Balatanya, the more you learn. It's a very well thought out, organized philosophical outlook.
Most Litvak Chassidut there is.
Yeah, it is. It's like, and it's very satisfying.
It's all in the head. It's all that organization of the mochin of the intellect of it.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No. I'll tell you one last challenge I'm having, and this is very, very difficult. The other challenge I'm having is, and I heard this from Rav Aaron Soloveitchik, Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik's brother, 30 years ago. He was lashing out at the then head of the Reform movement, Alexander Schindler. This is 30 years ago when I was in YU. And because Alexander Schindler was the head of the Reform movement, he was advocating patrilineal descent, that we should broaden the definition of what is a Jew. And I remember I never saw him so upset. And I don't know, I thought he was like overreacting almost. This is not Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik. This was his brother, Rabbi Aaron Soloveitchik, I had this chus to learn under. And he was like, you're going to split the community into two by changing the definition of what is a Jew. This is what a Jew, this is the definition of a Jew for thousands of years. This is what the Torah sources teach. Don't change it. And they did. And I will tell you, it was prophetic. This is my other major problem I'm contending with, that I have so many students whose last names are Rabinowitz, Schwartz,
Cohen, Levy.
Cohen, Levy. They had bar bat mitzvahs. They went to Hebrew school, and they're not halachically Jewish.
They went to the IDF. They served 3 years. They got shot at.
Yep. And they're not halachically Jewish, and it's not their fault. It's not their fault. And I'll tell you, it's one of the most painful conversations that I'm having to have again and again, sitting down with someone and explaining, because because their mother never converted, or it wasn't a serious conversion, and that they need to go through this. And Rabbi, my father was the president of our temple, or like what you just said, Eliyahu. I served in the Israeli military. You're telling me I was going to take a bullet for the Jewish people? You're calling me? You're saying I'm not Jewish? You tell someone like that, by the way, you need to go through a gerus. You need to go. Now, we've been relatively successful. I've been working with a lot of people, and I do it very quietly, because some people I'll say, listen, this is just between us. You don't need to tell anyone. Some people don't want to tell their parents. It's insulting.
Yeah.
But it's difficult. It's not simple, because, you can't do a proper conversion unless the individual is really going to commit to living a life of Torah and mitzvot. And that's not exactly where
if you don't do the conversion, then you just leave them with a shattered reality, and now you maybe push them even further, right?
Yeah.
But you can't let them live in a lie.
You can't live in a lie. And then I have a particular issue at MJE. So it's interesting the way you put that, because I don't want them to live a lie, and I feel a responsibility. But let's say I could sort of deal with that. I have a bigger issue. They keep coming around to MJE.
They get married.
And that number I gave you of 344 couples, I'm very proud of. I don't want that to be the 345th. And now I've basically facilitated that which I've been fighting against my whole life, which is, Jews and non-Jews marrying. I'm trying to, we're trying to get Jews to marry Jews and live lives of Torah and mitzvot. And so I will tell you, that's very, very challenging. The good news is that there are some very wonderful conversion programs that I've been working with. And I'm going on Friday, not mentioning who it is. I'm going on Friday to help somebody. I'm going to the mikveh. I'm not on the Beit Din. I'm just like the sponsoring rabbi. I teach, I help guide the person through the process. But I work with the RCA a lot. I don't know if you guys heard of the Rabbinical Council of America, whatever, they're a big rabbinic group, mostly YU, Rosh Yeshiva. And they've been very helpful, and they're very reasonable, but their hands are tied a little too. They can't just convert anybody because their last name is Rabinowitz. They need the person to be, committed to this kind of lifestyle. So I would say those are my biggest challenges.
It's extremely interesting because they all kind of tie together with this idea of these new age beliefs that are coming out of the academic world, of that, right? That there is no such thing as definitive genders or religion or this, and nation states. There's no nation states. We're all just human beings. Everything is like Esker, right? On the other hand, if you look in, like, it was just Rav Kook's yahrzeit, right? Rav Kook teaches to always look at like the sholish, the spiritual root that is the godly point that is giving life to anything in the world, especially the klipa, right? Negative forces in the world can only exist by way of the good holy spark that's in it. So yeah, in the end of the day, we are all Hashem. We are all one. And on the big grand scheme of things, it's all infinite and it's not limited. But in this world, right, we can't forget that we're planted in this world, and there is masculine, there is feminine, there is Jewish, there's non-Jewish, right? There's a leader and there's
it is one of the whole points that what I tell people is that they're missing out. They're missing out on the roles that really give meaning to so much of our life. Yeah. Like you brought up like the gender fluidity issue and friendships. Like there is something that women uniquely, bring versus male, right? And there is also something like a parent. It's interesting halacha. We take it for granted. You don't call a parent by a first name. I have a lot of my students who call their parents by their first names. And when I try to explain to them why we consider that inappropriate, they say because, if you want to get out of the relationship, you can have lots of friends. You can have peers. You can have equals. Those are called friends. Those aren't parents. And if you make your parents into friends, you lose them. You lose a lot of what you can get from being a child of a parent. Do you want to lose that? And do you want to lose that in the gender area? And you mentioned before about countries and civilizations. I'm a big John Lennon fan. My dad was actually If you guys are Beatles fans at all, I don't know if you know the music at all, but I'm a crazy Beatles fan, and my favorite was John Lennon. And so John Lennon has a famous song, Imagine. Okay. And imagine there's no country. Imagine there's no God. Imagine there's nothing. It's like what you said, Eliyahu. It's just total hefker. It's like, so I said, you know what? If you can imagine that, but imagine not feeling a sense of loyalty to anyone in particular because you don't have any groupings. You only feel passion and absolute intense love. If he was alive, I would say, look at your love for Yoko, who's still alive. The only reason you have more love for Yoko than someone else is because you made her, you preferred her over other people.
Mekudeshet, sanctified, separated from the whole world. You're mine and not anybody else's. You're not allowed to touch anybody else. You're not allowed to be seen alone with anybody else. Right? Why? Not because you're in trouble and you're you're less. No, because you're so special. You're so precious.
And you can have, by the way, that reference to marriage that you just said is excellent. I gave a speech, I can send this to you, about the Jewish concept of universalism, but I brought that up. Why does a chatan say to, Harei at mikudeshet, the groom says to his intended bride, you are sanctified to me, not to anyone else, because that's what's going to make their relationship special. It's unique, it's exclusive. And it's the same thing. We're not going to want to do things for fellow Jews in a more passionate way if we feel that same feeling for all people. Just like ask any parent, is it chauvinistic for them to treat their children better than they would treat some other parent's child? And that's actually bad parenting. You should treat your kids better. You should be looking out more for your own children than other kids. That's what makes life. Avidan, you said something about that's the whole world. That's literally human existence. And we just have to be nice about it and respectful. And I think what you did before, Eliyahu, when you brought up, Rav Kook, there's unity and there is this idea of achdus and connectedness with everybody. But that doesn't mean everyone's the same. And I can just flip-flop. And we have to articulate that fine line. Because we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, as they say.
It's this week's parasha as well. I mean, I don't know when this episode will be out, so hopefully, but there's the shotrim, that if you have two tribes in one city, what does Allah say? Two different Beit Din, two different sets of cops, two different set of court cases, and if you're from Shevet Benyamin and your halacha and your laws are set up like this, you don't go to Shevet Dan to go to the court case, right? They have different rules there. It's different, right? So I bring this up a lot, that a few months ago I was dealing with two people from the U.S. Embassy, right? Diplomats, political diplomats, part of Biden's crew here chilling in Tel Aviv. And at the end of this discussion, the woman said to me, like, what's your view on America? And obviously she doesn't know, she's not Jewish, she doesn't know. Right, they all hear about dual loyalty. I have one loyalty, right? And it's not even to Israel, it's to God and the Jewish people, right? Like one loyalty. So like didn't know what she was asking really, but my answer to her was, the biggest problem with America is the lack of diversity. And she was like, what? Right, we're talking about Joe Biden's political diplomacy team, and I'm telling her your country has no diversity, right? And she's like, what? I said, yeah, because American diversity.
Did we just lose Eliyahu?
Andrew, why is Eliyahu keep falling off?
Yeah.
That was great. That was interesting. Keep.
I don't know what's going on, but it's me it's my thing. It's the third time this happened this episode already. But all right, so basically, right, so I told you that America's problem is the melting pot. That the melting pot is everyone come move here. You can be Jamaican, you can be Jewish, you can be Irish, you can be Catholic, Protestant, right? But really, what they're doing in the end of the day is you come out an American, right? And then you lose what makes you a Jamaican. You lose what makes you so successful. You lose that spark that made the Israeli guy come out of the army and move to America and become a sales manager of a huge team within months because his head is different, right? Because he's actually Israeli. And that's what was so special about the tribes. When we came out of Egypt, We had 12 different lanes in the splitting of the sea. Every tribe walked down their own path, but they could all see each other through the sea, right? So you're completely together, but real diversity is everyone's in their own camp doing their own thing, but we're working unified towards something. And America does not have that at all.
That's interesting. I mean, America prides itself on doing that, but I guess the reality is, you want to be successful here, a lot of people try to shed their differences. You know, as you said, like the melting pot. You don't really have to, theoretically. That's what the founding fathers of this great country, said. They said you could do your own religion, do your own this, but just follow the rules and the laws. That's all. But you can still stay ethnically or religiously who you want to be. But we both know, the three of us know, that unfortunately that's not the reality. And that's unfortunately not been the reality for our Jewish brothers and sisters in America. And that's what kills me, because no one ever asked us to do this. Meaning no one asked any Jew to give up their Judaism to be a good American. In fact, it's just the opposite. The founding fathers escaped basically the Church of England that was imposing a certain religious ideology so they could practice their religion freely. And then people, in the name of being American, are giving up their religion, So it's
exactly.
It's a bit of a shame.
How do you install Jewish, also being in New York, a Jew is looked at as borderline a terrorist, right? By a lot of the people, especially on the college campus. Columbia University is one of the worst places to be as a Jew. And it's like, I'm sure, forget gender identity. How do you instill Jewish identity in such a place, in such an environment?
So first of all, it's important to know that the perceptions out there of Jews as terrorists is a very left kind of perception that a certain segment of the media promotes because they're so bought into the Palestinian narrative. But the typical person on the street, I'm not saying they're not influenced by this, but I don't think everybody is so bought in. Okay, I think that's unfortunately, and I went to Columbia. I went to Columbia for graduate school. And I had some experiences with professors, with other students there who just ignorant, literal ignorance about Israel's creation, And listen, it's not their fault. And I was a bit of a fan of Barack Obama, but Barack Obama's opening speech, this is 2008, when he went to Cairo, he talked about Jews being back in Israel as a result of the Holocaust. And he was trying to be nice. He was trying to be like, they need a safe haven. Look what they've been through. Zionism, the way he described Zionism, was some sort of new kind of phenomena after the Holocaust. And he completely negated thousands of years of Jews coming back to Zion. And so if that's the president of the United States, who's a bit of an intellectual, although he was very ignorant in this regard, just to say that this is a place where Jews have been coming from the days of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and there have been periods of time where it was more difficult for Jews to live there. There's never been a moment in history when Israel has been devoid of Jews. It has. So what do you expect the typical person to believe? So anyway, so first of all, just knowing that that's their mindset, I will tell you, I stay away in my classes and from when I give drashot, I stay away from politics. I don't think anything good is gained. If people ask me a question, I for sure share my understanding of the situation. I have a degree in international affairs. I have a law degree. I spend a lot of time on this stuff. I do teach proactive classes about history because I think that's important, because a lot of this is history that has been played around with, in my opinion. And by the way, I don't think it's a black and white situation. I don't think everything Israel has done is perfect. And I don't think that there hasn't been some casualties of war in terms of the Palestinians and displacement and all that. But you have to understand it within the context of what actually happened in the years leading up to 48 and then ultimately the 6-Day War. But most people think, just look at that example, the 6-Day War. Most newspapers, when they refer to the 6-Day War, when Israel captured the West Bank and the Sinai, the Golan Heights, when Israel, nobody has anything before that sentence. Okay, no one has any idea that Israel is about to be attacked. They took it in a completely defensive war and have been negotiating give parts of that back for peace ever since. If you just make people aware of that, recommend some books, you'd be surprised. I don't think the war.
But what about what about real Jewish identity? Because me personally, right, as a 29-year-old, right, on Instagram, seeing what a lot of my peers and a lot of the people in our age group that are out there trying to put out their messages, right? A lot of what I see is, if you're not connected to Israel, and when I say Israel, I'm talking the state of Israel, right? If you're not a Zionist, you're not as connected to Israel, then you don't really have Jewish identity, right? And you have tons of people talking and defending and promoting Hasbara and Israeli defense and promoting all these things of growing the connection, which I understand is completely important, right? And it might be the first step. You have much more experience with this than I do, right? That's why I'm asking this. But what about when can we make a transfer and say, hey, listen, you know what? Birthright is not about birthright. That's not Judaism, right? Birthright is not. Right? What about Shabbat? What about, and not from a halachic point of view, right? But from a conscience of like, this is what we do, right? What about, like, these kind of ideas? When can that be introduced? When is that brought into?
So I think it depends on the Jew, because there's two types, I think. There's someone who's really bought into Israel and the state of Israel. And then I think you're right. You have to, how do you then help that person find the roots of their love for Israel? What are the roots? The roots are Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. The only reason Israel has any significance is because of the history we've had with Israel as it's played out in the Torah. So you have to, but I really take it from the other perspective, which is I start the other way. I just start, why are we here? We're human beings. And what makes us different as Jews? We have this great mission. The mission is to be an Or LaGoyim. It's to reflect God's light in the world. What is God's light? Oh, and how is Israel part of God's light? But I'm taking it from a different perspective, but I understand that for a lot of people who are very much bought in on the Jewish nationalistic Zionistic level, and they don't really know the roots, and it becomes a religion in and of itself. The Hatikva becomes the new Shema, So it's not so simple. It's not so simple helping that Jew find where it comes from versus helping someone who's not really bought into Israeli nationalism, who's not a Jewish patriot, if you will. It's not so simple. You really have to start from the very beginning. God created the world. He created different nations. Every nation has a different purpose. The purpose of the Jewish people is to reveal God's light in the world. We need a place to do that. That's called Israel. So it really depends on who the person is. I think it's very hard for me to give an answer that works for everybody in any of these areas. I really think it depends who you're talking to.
It really does, because it really depends on the person, whether this is Israel, the state of Israel. It could be literally a stepping stone, or it could be like the opposite. It could be a trick. It could be a trap. You could get stuck in, like you said, a tikva can become now the new Shema. It can be the new thing.
Yeah.
And you get stuck there. And some people,
but but I will say there's probably, and I don't have a study to prove this, there's probably more Bali Tshuva, people who sort of went all the way, became fully religious, who started out as patriotic Jewish Zionists.
For sure, I was like that.
I was also I was also like that until the IDF. Yeah, the thing is right.
I'm curious to hear I'm curious to hear your stories. What was that point of transformation?
So for me was when I started to make tshuva and I started to realize, right, also the history ties into this, but when I started to realize, okay, the Torah is all filled with, right, and this is a funny thing that they always try to say, right? You know how many times Zion is mentioned in the Torah? Well, yeah, but that has nothing to do with Zionism. Zion is the name of Israel and Jerusalem, right? And that means that as Jews, we have an inherent, natural, historic, ancient connection to this place, no matter what ism you want to put to the end of that. Take out even Judaism. Am Yisrael, the children of Abraham and Yaakov, are connected to this land, right? So once I started to see that, and then you bring into the history side of everything that was with the Zionist movement, what was happening to the rest of the nation states around the Jews in the 125 years ago in the first Zionist Congress, right? What were those nations up to that inspired the rest of those Jews around them to want to also have a nation state, right? Poland was created then. All these other countries were starting to be created as nation states. Also, too, the Jews wanted to have there. So when I started to look at the whole thing, my takeaway was, why do I need this ism from the 1800s when this is literally much deeper than any ism possible? This is Torah and mitzvot on the deepest place possible. There's nowhere in the world I can be a better Jew, right? So why do I need this ism? And for me, when you add into the things that were done in the name of Zionism against Torah and mitzvot, it becomes very hard for me to connect to it, right? But the interesting thing is, right, when I went to the IDF, and then a lot of the things that, there's the things that we don't all agree with. And you can understand why they're in place for security reasons. But in the end of the day, if you go through them, you can understand that they're not necessarily maybe the best or the easiest processes to live with, right? The difference with me was that when I came out of the IDF, I didn't go to Shovrim Shtika. I didn't go to Breaking the Silence or to J Street or to B'Tselem, all these organizations that are Jews for peace and Jews trying to sell out, right? Why? Because for me, first things first is Am Yisrael and the Torah. So I'm not going to go because I had a bad experience now and spit in my nation's face, but I'm also not going to call myself a Zionist, right? Mm-hmm. So what do? I go deeper in Torah and mitzvot, right? And I reach out to every Jew and any Jew that's possible, and I try to spread the light of, hey, brother, listen, you're about this far deep in the kiddie pool, but there's a whole entire ocean beach, right? A resort with amazing, amazing activities filled with tradition and spiritual rituals and depth and knowledge that's called Torah and mitzvot. And it literally outdates Zionism by about 2,000, 3,000 years. So why don't you just check it out? Why don't you go deeper? You love Israel, amazing. But why stop at a state that is only 74 years old, right? A dream that is only 125 years old. Why don't you go back? Why don't you tap in exactly what you said, right? That we're only here because of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. That's me. But
wow. Thank you for sharing that.
But internally, right, when I look out and I see my Instagram feed, I'm like, wow, can you imagine some of these influencers with this power and the way they talk and the message and the tools they have? Can you imagine spreading Torah? Can you imagine taking a Baal Shem Tov story and putting it out to 100,000 followers,
Well, but let me ask you a question, Eliyahu. Do you feel that you had to shed like the Zionism that started like in the 1800s that you were talking about? Do you feel that, because there were things done in the name of Zionism that were anti-Torah, but I feel that even though the promoters of modern day Zionism, like Herzl and the others, Ben Gurion, that without them even knowing some of this, which is why Rav Kook, for example, was so positive about the Zionist movement. He didn't live to see the state created, but he was so positive because he felt that these people were bringing about the Atchalta de Geula, the beginning of the redemption. So I'm very positive about secular Zionism because I think it's in some way reflecting, and even if you don't subscribe to the Messianic Rav Kook kind of view, Rav Soloveitchik, who was my sort of teacher's teacher, was very into Zionism also because he felt that after the Holocaust, that was Yad Hashem. Is a famous article where he talked about the 6 knocks and from Shir Hashirim, Kol Dodi Dofek. And how could you see what's going on in modern times, anything other than Hashem's hand in modern history? Sure. So I'm just curious, like when you started becoming, because it sounded like you went from being modern secular Zionism into Torah, but do you think you have to leave the others, the modern?
I always had Torah first before I had anything to do with Israel, right? I was religious before I ever stepped foot in Israel, right? So I always had that, and also Sephardi. So it's like, it's not this thousands of years ago. It's like literally, no, my dad was in the IDF. I had that side of it, but the interesting thing is, like in Judaism, right? There's nothing's ever black and white, right? So I also see Eretz Yisrael as the beginning of the Geula, right? Medinat Israel, right? Not really Medinat Israel, but the fact that Medinat Israel allowed millions of Jews to come home, right? I can't not look at that. I'm not blind, right? I'm not going to the extreme where because of my principles, I don't see the clear miracle right in front of your eyes, right? But my view on that is, yes, I understand that every single thing that a Jew does is in the end of the day completely mevutal, nullified to Hashem's will. Even the sins that the Jew does are because Hashem wanted him to do it. If it happened, Baal Shem Tov says, then Hashem wanted it to happen, right? Up until it happens, you have to control your actions. Once it happened, it happened. So I get all these things, but I think the biggest secret is, because it's not only about what Ben Gurion did. It's not only about what Herzl attempted to do. There's still right now, in this current government, complete programs against the Jews and specifically the religious Jews, and plans to completely get rid of any dream that we have here, right? In this current situation right now, in the name of Zionism, voted for and supported, right? But what happens? We have an amazing pasuk that the Chabadnikim specifically sing it after davening every day, every minyan, and it's written from before the Baal HaTanya even. The Chida brings it, it's an ancient tradition. They can talk all the talks they want, they can make all the plans they want and have all their different, calculations of why they want to do things. In the end of the day, Hashem will flip it on them, especially if they're Jewish, right? Even easier, especially if they're Jewish. Hashem will flip it on them. So they set out to make a place that was a Jewish state, but democratic and not exactly religious, right? Because they didn't want yeshiva bachur.
And do you think, and Eliyahu, do you think, I'm curious, Avidan, I want to hear your story also. I'm curious how you go you're from Israel too, Avidan?
For me, it's a little bit different. Like he said, he was religious, and that helped with his transition and going to the army.
Right.
I was like Zionism first to begin with. I was more Zionistic than with Torah, and I went into the army, and it took me actually a while. Even after the army, I was very, very strong Zionistic, and I even brought like Israeli flag to my Chabad yeshiva, and I didn't like it so much. And there they started to like explain to me more the reality of things on a bit of a deeper level, and I broke down. I remember I literally broke down in tears. I cried. My reality was shattered in one night, and from then on, I started seeing things a bit different.
Why were they trying to say? Because Eliyahu was, I think, alluding to this as well, that there are just forces within the secular Israeli government that are just trying to keep Israel from being more observant. Is that it?
Yes.
Not only is it told to us, the second it's told to you, you can see it clearly. Yeah,
exactly. So when I started to I didn't take it necessarily for granted, but things started to click almost very quickly, and when you can see it, and it's not just that. It's like in history when you look back, like the reason it was founded, it was not with a good intention. Let's say it like that. But thank God, God has good intentions, even when other people don't have good intentions. The outcome is sometimes good anyway. So
maybe if you guys, I hope it's okay that we're going this way in the conversation. I just find this really interesting. But what bad intentions did the founding Zionists have? I mean, they wanted to create a safe haven for Jews, maybe not a place for Torah and mitzvot necessarily. I get that they weren't religious, person.
Let me handle this diplomatically.
I was gonna let you do it anyway. Cause
there's a lot that can be said here. I don't want to go there right now, just I don't think it's
okay. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. This is your podcast. This is your podcast, not mine.
I'll tell you why. We can definitely have this conversation, but there's some things I'm not going to say, and there's some things that I feel comfortable saying, right? But to beginning, let's just with the fact that, right, there was never really, when this Zionist Congress started 125 years ago, right, all types of Jews came, religious, non-religious, and everything was there, right? But the leaders and the ones that had the power were definitely intellectuals from the left that had nothing to do with Judaism, and they didn't want anything to do with Judaism. They were being attacked as Jews, and they didn't like that. And other nations around them were trying to make countries, so they said, hey, listen, we're Jews. That pintalayid, that Jewish spark that comes out when you start getting killed, right? That mesirut nefesh that is in every single Jew, that started to come out in them. Obviously, right, when they're going to make a country, so what are they going to do? It's going to have Jewish symbols. It's going to have all these things. But really, if you think about it, right, for example, Herzl, huge hero, right? Now, as a Jew, can I look back and understand how Herzl was integral to my life right now? Yes, I can understand that, right? God forbid, La'avdil, I can also understand why the Spanish Inquisition was integral to how I am right now, and how other events in Europe led to how we are right now, right? Not to put the Jew and those in the same conversation, but everything in life, right, leads to something. With that said, the man tried to convert us all to Catholicism to get a country in Uganda, right? So where was his head? What was really going on? Why did he want to bring all the Jews together and put them in one place if it was not to be a Jews? What was your goal?
I mean, just historically, he was impacted. He was, covering the Dreyfus trial.
Right.
And he was convinced, and this is why I have such great respect for Herzl, because he was an assimilationist. He thought that the answer to the Jewish problem was to assimilate, to shed your Judaism. And then when he saw it was impossible, he did a 180, and he said, it's not going to work. Now, he didn't say because he didn't say because I want to stay Jewish. He said I want to stay alive. He said that the non-Jew, the Gentile, is going to hunt us down no matter how much we assimilate. They're not going to care. And by the way, the reason I respect him is because most people can't admit that they were originally wrong. He originally said the best way, to be just to physically survive. Okay.
That means that we're no different than a goy, right? It's just
100%. He didn't believe. Yeah, he did not believe that there was anything uniquely distinct about the Jew or anything like that, but he wanted to physically survive. The only way to do that is to have your own country. Now, originally, he didn't believe that. Originally, he said the only way is to shed our Judaism, which is what a lot of others did. A lot of German intellectuals felt the same way. German Reform Judaism started out that way in Germany. And when the Nazis came for Jews, they didn't ask whether you were a Chassid or a Reform. So Herzl saw that. He was prophetic. He realized that, it's not going to work. Just practically, it's not going to work. We need our own country. But because he did that, because he could break from what he thought was true to something else, even though something else was not such a Jewish value, it was just survival. Now, survival is a Jewish value. Thank God he did that, and he started the first Zionist Congress I see all the steps, right? I see all the steps, but there's different things. There's a lot of different things that go on. That governments are bad things. Politicians are usually bad people, right? And they do bad things. And that's the history of the world, right? The more simple thing is that in the nature of the politician, if he's left alone to do his own thing, he's going to probably do something wrong, right? If there's not checks and balances, there's not a way to try to make sure he's serving the people. His nature will take him to doing bad things. And a lot of bad things happen, right? But it was a constant thing that we've seen back then until now, and it's happening still to this day, is that, and we can say this, right? Living here in Israel, I know what it was like being in America or living outside of Israel, and the longing that you have for Israel doesn't allow you to see anything bad. I know that feeling, right? And I know it living here in Israel, and I know it going as a soldier, that anything said about Israel, bad about Israel, you automatically defend whether they were right or wrong, right? But then there's okay, what's really going on here? And when you look at what's really going on here, right? It's like, for example, an American that's living in Dubai right now on business, right? 30, 40 years ago, if he had that opportunity, everyone in Dubai looked at him like, wow, you're American? I want to learn from you. I want to this. Now the world climate, I don't know if it's so much like that, right? Wow, you came from America. That's cool. But America's a circus right now, right? America's a laughing stock of the world right now. So how does that American feel? So it's the same thing now. It's kind of when you see what was done here and what is being done. So now, what else? What else are you talking about? What happened to the Yemenite Jews? That incident.
So that personal family that you have Ben Gurion shooting at a boat of Holocaust survivors. Ben Gurion trying to draft everybody and not wanting there to be a yeshiva learning. In the end, he, right, like you said, Herzl, realized. Well, Chazon Ish comes to him and says,
"Oh, we lost him." Okay.
So let's wrap it.
No, but let's keep going. Let's keep going for a little more on this. Okay. Mm-hmm.
So basically, there was a whole bunch of that went on, right? People can look this up, right? It's in the end of the day, it comes down. My personal view is this: if I was to be in front of an Arab right now that doesn't know anything about me, if he asks me if I'm a Zionist and I can't really be open with him, I would say yes. Why? Mm-hmm. Because for him, I'm a Jew, and he needs to know that Judaism and Zionism and everything that goes into that is one. Because if he's coming at me as an enemy, then it's all of us against you, right? But now when I'm sitting with my Jewish friend, I feel mm-hmm. I have an internal obligation to put down Zionism, right? Even at the most simple belief that a Jew has the right to exist in the land of Israel. No, he doesn't if he's not connected to Torah and mitzvot. No, he does not at all. The Torah says that itself. The Torah says that it will vomit you out of the land if you don't behave here, right? So, and not from a hard point, but from the fact that without the Torah, like you said, we have no place here. So for the Arab, for the hater, yeah, I'm a Zionist. I'm just like all the rest of these Jews, right? But for the Jew, I think we need to also the fact that Zionism was achieved. We're here. What now? We got Jerusalem, right?
See, that's probably a better approach, which is that, okay, there's a lot, because you could look at a lot of these situations in two different ways. I think the Yemenite situation, without getting into it, was just a catastrophe and one of the greatest Chil Hashem's and crimes against Yemenite Jews. I don't know how you can justify what happened there, and more keeps coming out all the time. But the example you gave about Ben Gurion firing on the Altalena, I'm not in favor of what he did, but I also could understand from his position what he did. I talk about how Menachem Begin, who was the head of the underground, would not fire back because he said the last time that Jew fought Jew was the Churban Bayit Sheni. And you study the Gemara in Gittin, the Kamsa Bar Kamsa story, and you see what happened. And he had incredible fortitude, but there is that scene in Defiance, if you've ever seen that movie, where the Bialski brothers, one person, took exception to the way he was leading, and he shot the guy. Now, halachically, there's no justification; you can't kill but I also understand why he felt that if he didn't do something dramatic, he was going to lose authority, and all heck would break loose, which is probably what Ben Gurion was dealing with.
Which is exactly what happened between the brothers and Yosef. Right? It's a rebellion against the king. We're all going to bow down to Yosef. The kingship is to Yehuda. What do you mean? Right?
Yeah. But it's good to listen. I think, but at the end of the day, I like the distinction you made between, dealing with our enemies. We need to be one. We need to be unified. But when we sit down and talk to each other, we should be able to. It's just the only issue is that I hate, and I almost protect my students when I bring them. We bring trips to Israel. I can't stand there needs to be love and respect between Charedim and secular Jews. We're brothers and sisters. This is so not what Torah wants from us. And it's hard. And I think there are mistakes made on both sides. There's no question. But listen, I give it to you guys. You're there. At the end of the day, you guys are there. You served in the army. Kol hakavod to you both. And my yarmulke is off to anyone who fights for the Jewish people. I never got that response before. That was very cute. Whatever. It's one of my. You can ask my wife this. This is, and my kids. This is the hypocrisy that I've lived with my whole life. Not living in Israel. The Ramban famously, Nachmanides wrote that, keeping a mitzvah in Chutz La'aretz, it's like batting practice. You know what I mean? You're not like in the bullpen. It's like practice. You can develop it, but it's not it. Israel's it. But I feel like we're doing important work here. And as long as our brothers and sisters are here, I've always told people, because I don't push Aliyah hard, because I want people to understand the importance of Torah in general. And then when they get more and more into Torah, they'll see the centrality of Israel and the mitzvah of Aliyah as well. But
and then they might actually stay here for longer instead of bouncing back to New York.
Oh yeah.
That's another thing, right?
But
if you make Aliyah,
right.
Yeah, exactly.
Vessels, so they can actually stay. Exactly.
100%. But it's hard. I mean, and Avidan, you grew up in Israel as well, right?
No, I grew up in Belgium most of my life.
Oh, you're from? Oh, I didn't realize that. You're European. Oh, interesting. Oh, so you have a whole other interesting story. Wow.
Yeah, it's
well,
a whole
kol hakavod to you
story.
guys because first of all, I just want to tell you why I think I'm a fan of your podcast, because most of the students, people I come into contact with, have never met a chassid. Maybe they walked by them, they saw them on the train in Williamsburg or in Borough Park, or when they went to buy some Judaica in Meir Sharim or Geula, they saw chassid. But it's a very different concept that the typical less affiliated Jew has of a chassid than what you guys are doing in your conversations. You guys are interesting and open, and you should continue to do that, because you have to, this is all about dispelling myths. There's so many myths that people have about Yahadut. And the first one is that religious Jews are brainwashed, closed off, not intellectually open, or interested in anything else other than their little Torah and mitzvot. And I think you guys, I don't know if you're trying to do this, but it has that effect. Just a casual conversation between two interesting, thoughtful people. And that in of itself, I think, accomplishes a lot. So kol hakavod to you guys.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And we see you from our far, right? Our brother on the other side of the pond taking care of the flock of New York. We need it, right? We need it. And for sure, it's important. You have an amazing team there, especially with Daniel, the millennial rabbi, and together is the only way, like we said, right? Everyone needs to be in their own lane. I can't tell you now, and I know if I tell you, grow a beard and grow out your payot, you're not going to do your job. You're not going to be successful in doing your job, right? So it's like everyone has to go on.
Yeah, I mean, look, I do 100%, but I also, you got to be authentic. You got to be who you are. My son, as you know, my son Yosef became very enamored with the teachings of Rab Nachman and Kabbalah and Chassids, and he learns Arizal, and so he grew himself. That's natural with that. I just think it's very important for us to be authentic, and Baruch Hashem, Torah and mitzvot allow all of us to be who we really are without having to put something on for somebody else. And I think that's what resonates. We were talking about challenges with young people today. I'll tell you the greatest thing about young people today. They're honest and they're authentic and they want that's why podcasts are so popular, because they don't want speeches and formal kind of addresses, and they want people chilling out and saying how they're actually feeling. So I think you guys are doing that. I struggle with that because I've spent 20 years being a little more formal. I was a rabbi in I used to have to wear a top hat and a fancy suit and a very formal.
With Rabbi Angel?
Different shul, but similar. That's Spanish Portuguese. I was a rabbi at KJ and Akilath Yeshua. And by the way, they're amazing and I love them. Just as Yekis. And I'm used to that. My mother, Alav Shalom, was a Yeki. So, but people just want. So
it probably drove you crazy that we were late and not on time. And
oh no! I have some of those traits too. So it works perfectly. We're both a little of a mess, so it's great.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Mark. If we could just ask, to wrap it up. Where can anybody find you? Where can they find more from you? You just plug yourself.
Okay, good. So if anyone's interested, I have a pretty strong Facebook and Instagram presence. You can follow me, Rabbi Wildes, on RABBIWILDES on Instagram, or Rabbi Mark Wildes on Facebook. I've got a YouTube page. And if anyone wants to get involved with MJE, it's jewishexperience.org. We've got stuff going on literally every day of the week in 3 parts of Manhattan. A lot of great stuff. And besides the 40-day challenge, I wrote another book called Beyond the Instant. Maybe share your addresses with Andrew, and I'd love to send you copies of the books.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Obviously, we're going to get it from the book, but if you could just really bless us with some parting words or whatever it is that can inspire us to go deeper into tshuva and closer to Hashem, leading up to the days of Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah that are coming on to us for the good of all of Israel.
Well, well, I don't know how well I'll do on that, but I will tell you that we just lost him. Okay. I will say that Avira da'aretz machkim, that it's a famous phrase from the Talmud, that the Avira da'aretz, the atmosphere of the land of Israel, is machkim. It's conducive. It's spiritually conducive. So Hashem should bless you. You're both very passionate about Eretz Yisrael for all the right reasons. Hashem should bless you both, that you should continue to absorb the spiritual holiness of the land and share that with all of your guests on your podcasts, and that you should use this month of Elul, Anilo Dodi V'Dodi Li, to be Makarev yourselves and the rest of Klal Yisrael. All of us together should use this month, very, very special month. So we're standing before Kodesh Baruch Hu, the Melech, crowning Hashem Melech on Rosh Hashanah, and Bezrat Hashem getting a kapara and a tahara on Yom Kippur. We should all be zocha for a ksiva v'chasima tova. Should be a good gebench dior for all of us, for our families, and you should just go mechayil chayil, my friends, from strength to strength.
Amen.